Hi, I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nick Nanos.
And welcome to Trendline. Nick, COVID-19 rates are relatively low in Canada. So far, so good. And live events are coming back. So what are you most looking forward to seeing?
Well, talking with my wife, we're looking to going to some live arts and cultural events,
Hmm.
but also got an email from, I have tickets for the Ottawa Athletico, got an email about their season opener,
Oh,
which
great.
means that for the Canadian Premier League team in Ottawa. So I'm looking forward to hopefully catching some games, some live soccer games in person. I shouldn't say live, in person.
In
Soccer.
person, finally.
Yes.
It's been so long. This is great. So in this episode, we're going to talk about, the need for possibly vaccine certificates, vaccine passports in order to continue to enjoy these live events. We're also going to do our 5-ish minutes of politics. We'll talk about Mark Carney and how the pandemic may affect Elections Canada. But first, yeah, so there's a lot of political pressure now, especially from Canadians who want to travel internationally and find that they need a real vaccine passport, a vaccine certificate. So the Prime Minister has addressed that he's working on it, but there seems to be a delay in this. I mean, what's the political risk for this?
Well, there's significant political risk, and and also the issue of some Canadians having problem going to countries because they mixed and match their
Hmm.
passports. They don't have two of the same passports, like two Pfizer or two Moderna, and they're running into that complication. And I think we just heard, Michael, that over the last couple of days, that Quebec is going to be offering triple shots.
That's right.
Does it sound like it's happy hour someplace in Quebec? Like triple shots are open if you need it. Anyways, so what we're seeing at least is, and I think what the risk is let's face it, most Canadians have done exactly what public health authorities and our politicians have asked them.
Hmm.
Politicians and public health authorities have told Canadians, go out, get 2 vaccinations. It's okay and acceptable and perhaps even good to mix and match your vaccinations. So Canadians in good faith have done that. And then all of a sudden they think they're fully vaccinated and that they can, for example, visit a friend or a loved one or go on a vacation. And then they find out that that particular country that they want to go to does not accept the 2 vaccinations because they're not from the same not from the same pharmaceutical company. So I think it's a problem. And I think Justin Trudeau not only has to try to fix this, because this was guidance kind of from not the federal government, but the federal public health authorities.
Hmm.
Look, Quebec's stepping up at least and trying to offer another shot. I guess we've heard that there's no downside so far in getting a third shot, but it just speaks to what I'll say, the complications on this vaccination. It's kind of like taking 2 steps forward, literally taking 2 steps forward, getting your double vaccination,
Hmm.
and then taking a step back because you think you can visit a loved one in the United States or go on your honeymoon or visit a friend in another country, and then you find out that that country doesn't think you're really fully vaccinated because you've mixed and matched.
I mean, and our own prime minister is mixed and matched. I think he did AstraZeneca and Moderna, which, full
Yeah,
disclosure, same for me.
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm a mix and match. I've got Moderna and Pfizer, but so the prime minister's traveling. Are they stopping him at the border?
Hmm.
I don't
That
know.
hasn't happened. He made it to the G7. Okay, so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so I we so he says that the federal government is in charge of international vaccine passports, let's say, but at a provincial level, we're getting to a point where restaurants are unsure if they should let fully vaccinated people in or whether legally they can bar people who are not fully vaccinated. It's a really murky area for them. So why aren't the provinces, or at least more provinces, stepping up with more of an official vaccine certificate?
Well, first of all, I think the default is to wait for some guidance from the federal government because you know what, Michael, whoever makes a decision is going to get the blowback
Mm,
if it really kind of goes sideways. So if
hmm.
the feds make a decision and it's not popular or doesn't work, the feds will be blamed with it. But the thing is that Canada is not in isolation. There are other countries doing things. For example, in France, of all places, you need a vaccination passport to eat inside of a restaurant and to go to the cinema and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And now we're hearing from the United States, land of the free, right? where governments in the United States are starting to make it mandatory for employees to get vaccinated. We see in Texas, health workers being laid off because they refuse to get vaccinated. So it's going to be interesting to see how there are other countries that you might think might be a little more focused on freedom and the freedom of citizens, taking stern measures to control the pandemic, and then for Canadians to be, I'll say, governments thumb wrestling to figure out what we're going to do on the vaccination certification side.
Speaking of the political risk or blowback, as you said, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, fully aware of that.
Everyone gets their proof when they get the vaccination. You're right. Anything can be fraudulent, right down from money to certifications. I just, no, we aren't doing it. Simple as that. And we're just going to move forward. Now, if it's federal, getting across the border, that's up to the federal government. But the answer is no, we aren't going to do it. We aren't going to have a split society.
Nikki, that's a pretty hard stance he's taken.
Oh, exactly. And, the other sad thing about all of this is that what seems to be the case is that now the people that are being affected most by the pandemic are those that are not vaccinated. So, they're the ones that really should get vaccinated. The reality is that this is a minority of people. But, it looks like, for example, that Premier Ford is not willing to take this on. This might have a lot to do with his bad experience when he suggested that police officers should be stopping people if they're outside of their homes. And I think in fairness, for average Ontarians at least, to have a premier on one day propose that it's okay for the police to randomly stop individuals, and then on the other hand to say, you shouldn't be obliged to have a proof of vaccination. Those two things, I don't think jive, because I think the proposed police intervention was much more invasive to human rights and civil rights than having a vaccination card. And you know what? We do have mandatory vaccinations in Ontario and across the country for mumps, measles, and rubella for kids to go to school. And it's mandatory. That's not optional. And the documentation is mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Nick, we're going to take a quick break, but after that, we'll talk about politics, of course, and Mark Carney's surprising decision. Nick, so let's stay on the topic of the pandemic for a bit. We are likely entering an election, I think any week now, the Prime Minister will call it. How is this going to affect Elections Canada and the way that we vote?
Well, think of it this way. Mail voting. I think, does this sound exciting, riveting? You notice there are crickets, Michael, playing right now? We're probably losing people in the podcast because we're talking about mail voting. But
yeah,
you folks, wake up. Listen to this. In the last federal election, out of 18.3 million ballots cast in 2019, about 55,000 were done by mail. And we recently did a survey and we asked Canadians how interested or uninterested they were in voting by mail if there were an election this fall. And it might not sound like a big number. 37% of Canadians outright said that they're interested in voting by mail. If all of those folks voted by mail, Elections Canada would be counting not 55,000 ballots by mail. They'd be counting a whopping 6.7 million ballots, right? Like that's
wow.
That's a lot of going through, that's a lot of this, a lot of this and making sure. So, the big question is, it's going to be very important for Elections Canada to come up with some clear rules. When do ballots have to arrive? How will they be counted? When will they be reported? The last thing, because in the ideal world, all the ballots are announced at the same time, whether they're in person or by mail. But to do that, what is the logistics of how soon ballots have to arrive and be certified by Elections Canada in order for them to be counted? Are we going to be kind of like the US? Michael, remember the US election?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Donald Trump almost won on election night, but then the mail ballots came in.
Yeah.
And then we had, two different scenarios because of the two different modes of voting.
I remember you called that, and it even fed into the strange conspiracy theory that the election was somehow, stolen or whatever, because the results changed so dramatically between the people showing up at the polls and the mail-in ballots, which leads me to another question I wanted to ask you, Nick. I mean, which party might benefit most from the mail-in ballots?
Well, we do know, so let's set aside whether mail or in person. We do know empirically, based on research that's been done by Elections Canada, that if a voter tends to be older, that they're more likely to vote, while younger people are less likely to vote. And, who knows? Think of it this way: we're in a pandemic situation. If mail voting is easy, and if it's run well by Elections Canada, we may see a really big number of older voters decide not to go in person because they're worried about their personal health and take advantage of the convenience of voting by mail. So this could fundamentally change the composition. As pollsters, we talk about the composition of who ends up voting. And traditionally, if older voters vote, usually that helps the Conservatives. When younger people come out and vote, that usually helps the more progressive parties, such as the Liberals and the New Democrats.
Oh, so we don't. I mean, we don't know for sure, but it's possible, I suppose, that on election night we might be seeing more of center and left parties leading, and the Conservatives behind, and then possibly when Elections Canada starts counting the mail-in ballots, that the Conservatives might see a slight bump in support later on.
Could be closer, absolutely,
Yeah.
depending on how many people vote by mail, and if it does tend to skew towards middle and older age Canadians, for sure.
Now, how we know? So it's complicates things for Elections Canada, but how does it complicate things for you, Nick, as a pollster?
Yeah, well, it's going to complicate things on a number of levels. First of all, we're going to have to start to track. We'll be doing tracking with CTV and the Globe and Mail, as we usually do every night, but we're also going to be tracking mail versus in-person voting, and the likelihood, because we need to do that in case there's different times that in-person voting results versus mail voting results are announced. If all the votes are counted at the same time, then it's not really a big issue. But if there's any scenario where not all the votes are counted on election day, they're received on election day, but not all counted, then we might come out with numbers based on what we estimate to be the in-person result, and numbers based on what we estimate to be the mail-in ballot result, in order to be transparent. But it just adds another complication to this. And I'm old school. I just like to do random sampling and have it representative and run the numbers. So it's just another thing that we have to factor for. Another potential risk related to the reliability of anyone doing research.
Well, the election has not yet been called, or we are expecting it soon-ish, let's say. But we already have a potential Liberal candidate decide that he's not running. In the last episode, we talked about former Bank of Canada, former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, and he has emphatically said he's not running, and he wants to, help fight climate change. Why do you think he made this decision, Nick?
Well, I think we have to take it at face value. We do know that he is very committed to climate change and the environment. He probably is also enjoying this role that he has compared to the past. And, the other thing is, so why don't we say that's on the positive side of the ledger, taking what he's saying at face value and it making a lot of sense. And I also think that if someone happens to be a star candidate, I'll say the dream scenario is to be a star candidate in a by-election, in a riding that the party, the governing party, already holds, and you can kind of, it's kind of like the tanks roll in and bulldoze all of the opposition parties, and there are a plentiful volunteers from ridings all in the whole region to come help in the by-election, and you cruise to victory. So that's kind of like the dream scenario for many star candidates. And when you're running in a general election, you're one of 338, and there's not that same type of support. So I think there's a combination of both those things: the personal priorities of Mark Carney, and I would also say the politics of being in an election. It's not a foregone conclusion that the Liberals are going to win, or that it'll even be easy, because it's too early to tell.
Now, the Liberals are waiting for the perfect time to trigger an election, of course. Now, how are things looking for Conservative leader Aaron OToole in his own stronghold of Alberta? Because I keep seeing, these, I guess, conservative alternative parties. I'm not sure how to refer to them, and popping up. Is he having trouble uniting his own support?
Well, there's no trouble yet, but there are kind of things that Aaron O'Toole and conservative-minded Canadians should be worried about. We have to remember that the splitting of the Conservative Party under the old Reform Party and the Progressive Conservatives basically put the Liberals in power for a decade. And what we do know right now is that there are people within Aaron O'Toole's own caucus who are kind of making grumblings and unhappy with some of the things that he's said. And he's got a caucus that is very right wing compared to mainstream conservative voters, and also based in the West. And then he has to deal with the Maverick Party, which is making noises, which is kind of like a regional protest party. And now, this past week, Derek Sloan.
Yeah.
We're saying this guy's name again. So Derek Sloan ran for the leadership, got 14% of the vote in the leadership on the first ballot, and then was punted off, or 14 or 15%. And someone was recording him on Twitter. And so whatever, I'm assuming that this was on purpose because it was fairly well framed. So if you go to Derek Sloan's Twitter feed, you can see him making a speech where he says that he's going to create a new unnamed party, A. B, he will, and I quote, "We are lighting a match." I'm not sure how that, from a communications perspective, is a good way, positive way to engage Canadians. But anyways, got people's attention. And I think he referred to this new party / movement as the greatest patriotic movement Canada has ever seen or will ever see.
Right.
Sounds very confident. But
yeah, he also said, I think he didn't want to compete against Maxime Bernier in certain ridings, something like that as well. Yeah.
We don't know whether this is serious or significant because, Michael, in our polling, for example, the People's Party is at 4%, but it's a bit of a parking space. We've also, because of the way that we do polling, we've been capturing the number of Canadians that mention that they want to vote for the Maverick Party, and there haven't been enough in order to merit them getting above 1%, which means they're not reported because they're in the other category right now. So not a big threat, but I think the optics for average Canadians that, under Aaron O'Toole, there's still the People's Party still alive, the Maverick Party is organizing, and this other third party. The optics, even if these parties amount to zilch, diddly squat, the optics is not good because it just speaks to conservatives not being united.
Wow. In terms of other, parties in turmoil, I shouldn't say turmoil. It's not turmoil, but the Green Party leader Annamie Paul is trying to get past this internal fighting that she's got. And we've had this horrible extreme weather events in these past weeks. I don't know. I know actually it's been really hot in Ottawa, Nick. It's been super hot in Toronto. We've got extreme heat in the West Coast, feeling these wildfires. Northwestern Ontario, we've had wildfires. You'd think that the Green Party would be able to get out there front and center and talk about this, but I don't know. It's the wrong headlines for her.
Absolutely. And the thing is, so let's set aside the controversy just for 1 second. If you look in the news, there's been significant extreme weather events, right? Before the pandemic, the environment was the number one issue of concern, and the pandemic concern is going down, and concern about the environment is going up. And the the Green Party have a new leader. So you look at those things and you think on paper, okay, maybe the Greens are at a moment in time where concern about climate change, renewal of the leadership, and all the stuff that's going on could be a moment in time for them to get to the next level beyond the current number of members of parliament that they have. And then they get in a policy argument not over are we too aggressive or doing enough for the environment, not over kind of what needs to be done in order to change Canada to hit net zero targets.
Mhm.
Policy issues over foreign policy in the Middle East, and what I'll say, comments that were made by the leader, or apologies that
Mhm.
people wanted the leader to make. And it's been a significant distraction. And I think for all those Canadians, about 3 in 10 Canadians that would be open to voting Green, they're probably just disappointed in the Greens, not just looking at Annemie Paul, but just disappointed in general. Say, why can't you folks get your act together? Look what's happening. Like, Canada is burning, and you're suing each other over, I'll
Yeah.
say, table stakes,
Yeah.
right? And petty politics.
And Annemie Paul is trying to talk about the climate change issues on her Twitter feed. If you go onto her Twitter feed, she is talking about it, but it just is just getting crowded out by this internal squabbling.
And until Annemie Paul can put this to rest and behind her, it's going to be a distraction, because for reporters, every time they do an interview with her, there will be a question related to this. Even if there's another environmental catastrophe, even if she has a brilliant plan, brilliant environmental plan for Canada, this will be an overhang, a negative overhang. So, in the ideal world for the Greens, if they want to do okay or do well in the next federal election, and also for Annemie Paul and her political future, they have to put these squabbles behind them and put the importance of the environment as an issue ahead of internal squabbles within the party. Because if not, the Green Party will just be irrelevant in the coming election.
Nick, we went way over our 5 minutes, I think, for our five-ish minutes of
Yeah.
politics chat, but that brings us to this week's Upshot. So what do you have for us?
Okay, it's a long weekend in many places in Canada, and I would expect, we know that the federal election is coming. I would expect that during this long weekend, which I understand that the Prime Minister is on vacation,
Right.
but I would expect that this weekend will probably be the weekend when Liberal strategists, along with the Prime Minister and the Liberal leadership, will be deciding when they might want to trigger an election, whether it's in the first, second, third, or fourth week in terms of dropping the writ. So I think technically the Prime Minister is on vacation, but I don't know. Is it a real vacation? Who knows? I know I'm supposed to be on vacation, and my wife doesn't believe that I'm on vacation because the election's coming. So she can see through it.
It's kind of hard to relax, Nick, when you know that the election call could be happening at any minute. But
yeah, it's kind of like, that phase of sleep when you're half asleep and half awake, and then something jars you awake, and it's called the writ. That's where we're at right now. We want to take a nap. It's part of my old age. Want to take a nap, but I can't because I'm on edge, because who knows what day the election may come.
Oh, you and me both. Nick, as always, thank you very much. And where can we find you?
On Twitter at Nick Nanos, or if you're interested in lots of stats, go to the website www.nanos.co.
And I'm also on Twitter at Michael Stittle, and you can find more information about what Nick and I have discussed in the news stories at CTVNews.ca. Thanks for listening and watching.